So if a propeller has been feathered in flight, and we then want to unfeather, maybe to try and restart the engine, how can that be achieved? Well, the problem with the feather position is, if the pilot wants to start the engine again, so the starter motor will have to turn the propeller over. But if you can imagine this propeller turning in this direction, and the windage hitting the propeller here, there's going to be a lot of windage for the starter motor to overcome. So it can be difficult to turn the engine over and difficult to start. So what we would like to do is to turn the propeller into a fine angle and let it windmill a bit to help the starter motor turn the engine over and get the engine starting again. So how can we do that? Well, if we can't start the engine, then we can't get the oil pressure up to move the cylinder to a fine position. So on the aircraft there may be an accumulator, and in the accumulator there is some oil. So when the engine is operating normally, governor oil pressure is allowed to go into the accumulator here under high pressure. So it goes through this non-return valve, and that oil is kept in there until it reaches a particular pressure, and it's held at that pressure using this nitrogen. So when we want to unfeather the propeller, the pilot can select unfeather, and when he selects unfeathered, this valve here will open, and this high pressure oil can come down into the cylinder, push the piston back, and move the propeller into a fine position. So to allow that to happen, the pilot will need to lower the valve here, so he'll need to put the condition lever back into maybe some constant speed range. Okay, so we begin by moving the condition lever into the constant speed range. Then we're going to select the valve. Okay, so the unfeathering valve. That's going to allow this oil that's been held in reserve under pressure. It's going to let that all come down out to the piston. So the charged nitrogen here, so that's nitrogen pressure has pushed this piston back, and that has pushed this oil down into the cylinder here. When it gets into the cylinder, it's going to move the cylinder back, and it's going to allow the propeller to go to a more fine position. So it's in the fine position, it'll probably start to windmill. Here we have the RPM is increased to 20. Start to windmill. The pilot can now turn over the engine. It'll be a lot easier to turn over, and hopefully the engine starts, and we can start operating safely again. So that is how unfeathering is achieved with a single acting propeller. So this is from the illustrated parts catalogue of a Cessna 335. This is the governor. It's in here on the engine, and in here in the wing we have the accumulator. So this is where the oil and the nitrogen, so there's a place here to charge the nitrogen. So the nitrogen is in here, and then when the governor is acting normally, the oil comes in and it fills the accumulator until we get to a predetermined pressure determined by the check valve. And when we want to unfeather, then the nitrogen is going to push the cylinder back here. That's going to force the oil back into the governor, from there out to the propeller, and we can unfeather the prop. Okay, so that's manually unfeathering the prop.